to the Apocrypha Apocalypse. I'm Gary Machuda, and in this episode, we're going to give you a sneak peek behind the curtains at our canon research. And I want to specifically talk to the issue of numbers of quotations, that type of thing. This can be something that is, oh, I don't know, can be manipulative. It can maybe have certain things with numbers that has great rhetorical effect, but actually there's some smoke and mirrors behind it. And so I was just running down some sources this week, and I want to share with you some of the things that I found and some interesting stuff. So that's what we're going to do. And specifically, we're going to be addressing a quote from John Meade and Gallagher's work, Biblical Canon List of Early Christianity, repeatedly recites information from Biblia Patristica. Okay, Biblia Patristica. And in one of the quotes in the back of the book, when he's talking about the Deuterocanonical book of Judith, he makes this remark. He says, Biblia Patristica catalogs no second century instances of the use of Judith, but 23 instances in the third century, only from chapters 8 through 14, Tertullian, Origen, Julius Africanus. In the fourth century, there are some 80 uses of the book. Now, I've listened to several appearances of John Meade where he's talking about the Deuterocanon, and I've heard him make reference to this a couple of times, and he seems to use it for a rhetorical effect that there's something suspicious about total lack of any kind of instances of Judith being used in the first 2 centuries of the church. And I guess rhetorically, that does kind of have some punch, and it may lead people to suspect that, well, maybe Judith was kind of absent from the thoughts of the early Christian fathers. So that's what I want to do in this video, is just basically look a little bit into this and see what the data actually says so we could get a good perspective on this, because I'm sure it'll be picked up by others and they're not going to do the work that we do here on this channel. Which, by the way, let me take a pause here because I always forget to do it till the end of the program. But guys, if you're watching this video, you like the channel, please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, like, leave some comments. That helps with the algorithm. Also, tell your friends about it. Let's grow this channel because this is very information about what I believe is possibly the most important topic that separates Catholics and Protestants, the Old Testament canon. So please spread the word. And also, if you want to support us financially on Patreon, myself and William Albrecht have accounts there. We appreciate your support. Okay, end the commercial break. Let's start talking about this. So Meade makes a couple of observations based on the Biblia Patristica. No citations in the second century, 23 in the third, only these chapters. He gives the early church fathers, and then in the fourth, it goes up to 80. Okay. What is the Biblia Patristica? It's a set of 7 volumes that was originally published in 1975. I should have had a picture of it, by the way. It's almost like a computer printout of references. And basically, what it did was went through the critical editions of the early church fathers, and century by century goes through and lists any kind of reference to a book of the Bible. So it has all the proto-canonical books, has deuterocanonical books, and as we'll soon see, it also has some extra canonical books as well. So Meade cites this repeatedly, and I've also heard him cite this other source too. And I want to tell you about this because this is a great resource if you're interested in this kind of thing. And I'm going to give my own thoughts and warnings about it. But the book set had been continually expanded over time, and it has been, I think, virtually replaced by this website, which is free. It is biblindex.org. So it's BIBLINDEX.org. It's available in English and other languages. And the beautiful thing about this website is that it continued to work to expand and add a lot more material that was in the printed edition. Okay. So it's much more expansive, and it's a heck of a lot easier to run down things, of course, when you have a search engine. So there you go, guys. Immediately right there, I just gave you a very powerful search tool for you. Unfortunately, I couldn't run down this particular volume of the Biblia Patristica to double check Meade and Gallagher's assertion that there is no instances of Judith in the first 2 centuries by the early church fathers. But what I want to do is I want to jump on this website and let's see exactly what's going on here in terms of citations. Now, the website, like I said, is much more expansive and up to date than the written literature. And since Meade and Gallgher book is, after all, it's published by Oxford University Press, I'm sure they felt it was incumbent to nail it down with some sort of authoritative written source. So I didn't see any instances of them citing this particular website, just the printed edition. Um, Although I believe I have heard Meade in his talks on the web use or cite this website. So I think he is familiar with it, but it didn't make it into the book. So is it true that there are no citations of Judith in the first 2 centuries of the church? Let's go to the website. Okay, so here's the website, the homepage. Guys, if you want to look at early church fathers references, you go up to this top part, hit patristic tools. If you want to search down locations or quotations by within the patristic corpus, you click that link right there. This brings you to the search for biblical quotations. Now, it is a little quirky. Actually, it was horrible. They recently updated this website. It's much better now, much more user-friendly. The old one was very user-hostile. This actually is nice. I don't mind. So you can pick what version of the Bible you want to use, and you can select the years, genre, things like that. It still is a little weird in terms of its search engine, but nevertheless, it's helpful. It's helpful. So you can search for strings and stuff like that. So we want to look for references to Judith in the first 2 centuries of the church. So we'll go here. We'll select year 1 AD and 200. Okay, so the first 200 years of the church. And we also want to add a biblical reference. Now, since we're not looking at a particular reference, we're looking for the book. We're going to select, let's see, where's Judith here? Let's select Judith. Okay, why can't I find Judith? Where are you? There we are, Judith. All right. So we're just going to leave this blank. We're just looking for any instances of the book of Judith from the year 1 to 200 AD. And now we're going to hit search. But before I hit search, I need to tell you something about this collection. I rarely use this. And the reason for it is because the database, I believe, is linked to every single cross-reference or reference in these critical editions, including some non-critical like the main, right? Now, these authors, even in the critical editions, will record or reference things that truly aren't quotations. They're more allusions and sometimes very distant allusions. Sometimes it's just some sort of grammatical connection. Okay, and that's why I don't use it, because I'm more concerned about actual quotations or very strong allusions, and I'm interested in the context in which they're used. I'm not really interested in incidental correspondences of thought, things like that. So the results will generally be a lot bigger than what you would find if you went through printed editions of those early church fathers, because they don't usually put in the footnotes Bible references unless it's a pretty solid reference. So I actually like doing my own work with early Christian writers, early church fathers, things like that, because those will give you a much stronger feel. When you check out things on this website, It's much broader and it's a little quirky. I'm going to show you some of the quirkiness, God willing. Okay, so we're going to hit search and see whether or not there are no instances of Judith being used in the first 2 centuries. Now, when I've heard Meade use this on websites, I immediately noticed he made a mistake. And it shows here, by the way. Now, notice here are the results. There are 6 quotations of Judith in the first 2 centuries of the church. And then here we have a quote from Judith 8, 8, 10, 11, 12, and 13. All of them are made by Clement of Alexandria in a Stromata. Here's the critical edition, and it gives the page and line number. So if you want to look up where this reference is being made, that's beautiful. I love it. Clement of Alexandria is writing, it's hard to pinpoint, but generally in the 190s to the first decade of 200s. Okay, so 190s, 200s. And that's why this is flagged, the Stromata is flagged, because technically there are instances of use of Judith by Clement of Alexandria. So to say there is no instance in the first 2 centuries, that might be true for the printed edition in 1975 that Meade and Gallgher are referencing. But with the updated version, the Clement of Alexandria references put that to rest, that no, there are at the very end of the 200s. Now, I thought maybe Meade and Gallgher were using this website, and I thought, well, maybe instead of 200, maybe they put 199. Okay, maybe they didn't count the year 200 as part of the 3rd century, right? So I did the search here, and I'm going to push the search button again, and here's the results. And notice Clement of Alexandria comes up. So then I was wondering, well, maybe Clement of Alexandria, when does this actually register to? So let's move it to 195 AD. And look, there's Clement, still there. What about 185 AD? Okay, which would be a little bit after Melito Sardis. And now we don't have any instances. Okay, so I believe, if memory serves me correctly, this particular database, I think it's 189, maybe. Let's see if it comes up again. Nope, doesn't come up with 189. So 190 is the cutoff. So if memory serves me correctly, 190 is definitely within the first 200 years of the church. And as you can see, Judith is used, and actually uses quite a bit. Chapters 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, all quoted by Clement of Alexandria. Now, this brings up something quirky with this website. And this is why I generally don't use it, guys, because it does have a certain quirkiness to it. Okay. Let's see. How can I demonstrate this? I need a book that's a proto-canonical book that would be found. Let's see. Let's do Ezra. Okay, Ezra, and we're going to do from 1 to 190. Hopefully this will turn out the way I want it to, so I can show you this. Okay, it does. Excellent. Okay. Notice Melito of Sardis quotes Ezra in this index. And this is from the Eklogiae. Now, what exactly is the Eklogiae? This is a fragment of Melito preserved by Eusebius in his church history. And we've done videos on Melito of Sardis. We've talked about Melito of Sardis in his canon. Now, why is this giving a hit for Melito of Sardis from the Eklogiae? And the reason is it's a list, and it actually says Ezra on the list. It doesn't quote Ezra. It doesn't allude to Ezra. The fragment just has the title name Ezra in it. Okay? And it shows up on this list. Now, this is part of the quirkiness of this program. It gives a hit for Ezra coming from Melito Sardis because it's mentioned by name in the list. But when you look at Judith, okay, as we saw, Judith only comes up with Clement at the end of the first century. Well, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time finding Judith here. Okay, there we go. Yeah, like we saw, Clement of Alexandria, the end of the second century, hits with Judith. But now this is important. Judith is mentioned by name very early on in the early church fathers, namely in the first Clement, which is written by Clement of Rome, addressing a letter to the church in Corinth. Okay. And here it's mentioned in First Clement chapter 55. I'm not going to read all of this, but notice this in verse 3 of 55. Many women fortified by the grace of God have accomplished many heroic actions. The blessed Judith, when the city was besieged, asked permission of the elders to be allowed into the foreign camp. By exposing herself to danger, she went out of love of country and of the people who were besieged, and the Lord delivered Holofernes into the hand of a woman. To no less danger did Esther, who was perfect in faith, expose herself in in order to save the 12 tribes of Israel that were about to be destroyed. For by fasting and humiliation she begged that all-seeing Master of the ages, and he, seeing the meekness of her soul, rescued the people for whose sake she had faced danger. Unquote. Notice Judith is explicitly referenced in First Clement. Now, this is a first century, first century document. This can be dated anywhere from 80 AD, some even put it earlier, to 98 AD, sometime around there. This is an apostolic father, and as you can see, Judith is explicitly mentioned. Now, going back to the Biblia Patristica, why doesn't Judith pop up as an instance in the first couple of centuries of the church? Now, remember, my search dates from the year 1 to 190, that would definitely include First Clement, yet it's not here. But if we do Ezra or any of the other books that Melito of Sardis mentions, right, not quotes or allusions, but it mentions, it's not there. It's not there. So that's why I mean this is a quirky program. So I just want you to be aware that the data there isn't terribly good. Now, I'm just curious, Esther. Let's see if Esther shows up in First Clement. So we're going to do the same dates. Book of Esther. Going to scroll down. We got Philo, first century author, Clement of Alexandria, anonymous hagiographic writing, a couple more, and the rest are Clement. Okay, so Esther doesn't show up either. Now, remember, Melito Sardis omitted Esther in his list. So let's pick another book that Melito does mention. He mentions Isaiah. Let's see if we can find the reference to Isaiah. So why is it Melito of Sardis, because he mentions a book name, is included in the text? I don't know the answer to this one, by the way. But it's omitted on the other. Oh, this is going to be too much. Darn. Let's see if it's on the second page. I should have did this before I started recording, folks. A lot from Irenaeus. Yeah, I should have picked some lesser quoted proto-canonical book. Why don't we do that? Let's see, what would be a lesser quoted deuterocanonical book that explicitly Proverbs is. Melito mentions Proverbs. Let's see if Melito comes up. Boy, there's a lot of hits. Melito Sardis, here you go. Eclogiae. Yep. Yeah, so you see the quirkiness there? I mean, Clement mentions Esther and Judith explicitly, yet both of them don't show up on the hit list. But Melito Osiris mentions proto-canonical books, they pop up. That's why you got to be careful with this list. And by the way, some of it, there's extra notations. People have tried to run down and refine this. So I'm really excited. This could be a really good tool, but it's just too general and too quirky to really make some good decisions from it. So okay, so Meade and Gallagher, yeah, the source they quoted does say what they say, but it's not accurate. Clement of uh, Clement of Alexandria does make 6 quotations from Judith, and those are quotes, by the way. I should have looked those up as well for you. So, what was the next thing that Meade and Gallagher say? They say that so there's no instances of Judith before the second century, false, but 23 instances in the third century, as if this is something really spectacular, like suddenly they discovered Judith, right? But, and then he has to throw a quote to only chapters 8 through 14. Okay. Well, why don't we do that? Why don't we expand our search to, let's do 300. Is that correct? Yeah, 300. And we're going to look for Judith. I can find, yeah, I found it. All right. I'm getting better. Okay. Check to see if I'm human. Yes, I am, as far as I know. And okay, so there are 28 quotations where Meade and Gallagher in the written source says there's 23. Like I said, this is more expansive and updated. Or perhaps they use this and they eliminated some of these. So you have Origin, you have Africanus, like they mentioned. You have Methodius, Saint Methodius there, one instance. Tertullian is mentioned, Origen's mentioned, Africanus. Athanasius of Alexandria, this seems to be an unverified one. Eusebius of Caesarea is probably a quote from somebody, so it doesn't really count. Clement of Alexandria, a lot of those, the Stromata still shows up, and then Origin. So, okay, so 23. Okay, somebody might say, well, that's a huge jump from 0 to 23 or from 8 to 23. Being the nerd that I am, and you guys know I'm nerd. In fact, if you want nerdy research like this, guys, support me on Patreon because I always share this with my patrons. When I spend time, hours really, running down stuff like this. So here's my little spreadsheet of the Biblia Index, I guess it's called. And I just wanted to record just to get a feel for what we're looking at in terms of quotation. So on the top, running horizontally, these are the years that I plugged in to the Biblia Index. As you can tell, I this took a couple of days. If you want the spreadsheet, guys, throw me a couple of bucks in Patreon because I can't support my family while I'm running down this crazy stuff. So if you could throw me a few dollars, I appreciate it just to make this research worthwhile. But anyway, so I go through all the stuff here and notice when you move from, now this is the 200s. Okay, when you move from the 200s to the wait, we move from 1 to 200, the 2 to 300. Notice there is a jump in numbers. For example, Genesis jumps from 5,991 instances to 6,799 instances. Exodus 24:34 to 35:60. Ruth, you only have one instance in the first 200, but it jumps to 34 when you get from 200 to 300. Samuel 89 to 911, 35 to 368, 115, 632. Okay, 7 to 59, 7 to 50, 5 to 959 for a Song of Songs. Why is there this jump in numbers, right? And of course, then you have Judith. Let's see if I can find Judith right here, jumps from 6 to 28. So it fits in pretty much like all the other things. Obadiah, 1 to 7, right? What accounts for this jump? And this is something you need to know for apologetics purposes. If you're searching in the early church fathers and you're looking at numbers, realize we're dealing with available surviving manuscripts. Available surviving manuscripts. There was a lot more that was written in the early church that didn't survive the ages. For one reason or another, either they ceased to be copied, maybe they only had a few copies and those few copies were lost. Who knows, right? There's a ton of data. So we're just looking at the iceberg, the top of the iceberg of available evidence. Now, as you move through time, the corpus, the body of evidence is going to grow because the more recent it is, the greater chance of survivability. And also, when you move from the 200s to the 300s, now we're starting to, the type of information is much more pregnant with its use of scripture than earlier information. When you're dealing with the year 1 to 200, really, first century is just Philo of Alexandria, New Testament, and some other little scraps here and there. Then you have a few apostolic fathers that may precede the turn of the first century, but that's it. It's very, very small. So you would expect minimal citations. Although some books, as you can tell, were quite popular, like Genesis and the Pentateuch, that type of thing. When you move from the age of apologist into 300, when you start approaching that, now you start having theological treatises coming. Now you have some fathers that wrote an awful lot and a lot was preserved, like Origen of Alexandria. So you have Bible commentaries, you have treatises, you have homilies. It starts growing and growing. Then when you get to 300 to 400, then you really start expanding the amount of information because we have, like I said, a lot more commentaries, a lot more theological treatises, a lot more correspondences, things like that. So the number of citations available to us from the available evidence grows expansively over time. And that's why point made by Meade and Gallgher, for someone who isn't familiar with that background, may suggest something that really isn't important, right? The fact that 23 instances pop up in the third century is no big deal because, like we see here with the overall, and this includes everything in the kitchen sink. Remember, this isn't just quotations, allusions, things like that. You can see it grows, it grows, and grows. And by the way, I want to throw the second warning on for this website. And Meade and Gallgher uses the print edition. Apparently, the online site, I don't know what's going on with it, but all this information with the additions Esther, Third Ezra, Third Maccabees, this is not accurate at all. I I don't know why none of it's showing up. It's very weird. And when it does show up, it's like the same thing repeats throughout. So I think they have a bug on their website. Just FYI, because the data just doesn't square. Okay. So the jump that is mentioned by Meade and Gallgher is not really anything super important. And also the mention that it's only chapters 8 through 14 that are mentioned of those 23. That's not big either because the book of Judith has 16 chapters altogether. So that's a pretty good chunk of Judith being used. And of course, that increases as time goes on as well. Then it says in the fourth century, there are some 80 uses of the book. Well, yeah, that kind of follows what we just saw here, right? When you move on to the fourth century and so on, it balloons. For the fourth century, you have 18,763 instances of Genesis being used in some sense from the writings from the year 1 to 400s. It's just, it grows, it grows, it grows, it grows. So, yeah, so that's pretty much it, right? I just want to point this out because, like I said, when it comes to numbers, sometimes numbers can make a big impression. It sounds almost damning right? There's no instances of Judith being used in this by the second century church. When you look into the data, you look at the available evidence, and you look at the quirkiness of at least the website. I'm not sure of the printed one. I'm going to have to run down the actual printed version just to see whether they do the same quirkiness with Melito Sardis. But when you look at it in terms of the overall data, it's really much to do about nothing. In fact, it's not even worth putting in their book. They could have used that space for something more important. And in fact, they don't really make too many comments like that for other books. And similar comments could be made for proto-canonical books. So it's just not very helpful. Okay, guys, I'm going to park it here. Again, please subscribe, like, ring the bell, do all that stuff, leave some comments. In fact, if you've watched this video all the way till its end, do me a favor, put in the chat Biblia. How about that? Biblia, to let us know that you actually watched this video till its completion. Very interested to see if you did that. If you did, kudos. You did, kudos to you. All right, I'm Gary Machuda. I hope everybody has a great week. Bye-bye.